Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. We hope you enjoy the tale we have for you today. So, let's begin. Aaron Carter's fingers moved with practiced precision over his keyboard, his eyes darting between several computer monitors. He was putting the final touches on his latest project proposal. The office buzzed with activity, but Aaron remained laser-focused, his mind honed in on every detail. As a project manager, he took immense pride in his meticulousness and ability to juggle multiple complex tasks at once. Checking his watch, Aaron realized it was well past 7 p.m. He sighed, acknowledging that yet again he had lost track of time. With the day's work saved and his computer shutting down, Aaron leaned back in his chair, stretching. The day had been a blur of meetings, deadlines, and constant interruptions. All he wanted now was to go home, relax, and spend some quiet time with Lena, his wife of 8 years. She had always been his balance, the calm in his storm. Where he was logical and methodical, she was warm and spontaneous. Her yoga classes kept her busy, but their evenings together, filled with peace and conversation, were what he looked forward to most. The drive home felt like a soothing break from the intensity of the workday. The further Aaron drove from the city, the more tension released from his shoulders. Pulling into the driveway of their modest suburban home, he smiled, anticipating the comfort of being with Lena. She was his rock, his sense of peace, and the thought of unwinding together after a long day lifted his spirits. As Aaron opened the front door, he called out, "Lena, I'm home." But instead of her familiar voice greeting him, silence filled the house. His smile faltered slightly. Lena had mentioned something earlier about a late yoga class, but he had forgotten. Shrugging off his jacket, he made his way to the kitchen, thinking a snack might hold him over before a shower. Passing the bathroom, something unusual caught his eye. The trash can was slightly overflowing, and there was something there, something white and plastic peeking out from beneath a few crumpled tissues. Aaron paused, a chill running through him as he recognized what it was. His hand trembled as he pulled the object out. A pregnancy test. 2 pink lines stared back at him. Positive. Aaron's mind raced, his thoughts colliding in disbelief. It couldn't be possible. Just 3 months ago, he had undergone a vasectomy, a decision he hadn't told Lena about because he thought they had agreed they didn't want children. They had been on the same page about it for years. But now, holding irrefutable proof in his hands, his world tilted. He sank to the bathroom floor, the cool tiles pressing into his back as he stared at the test. His heart pounded in his chest, confusion and fear swirling in his mind. How could this happen? The test must be wrong. Or maybe... No. He refused to let his mind entertain the alternative. Lena wouldn't betray him. She couldn't. But as Aaron sat there, fragments of the past few months clicked into place. Lena's late-night yoga classes, which seemed to stretch later and later. The way her phone was always face down when he walked by. The growing emotional distance between them, subtle but undeniable. He whispered into the emptiness of the bathroom, "No." His voice sounded hollow, unconvincing even to himself. On shaky legs, Aaron stood and made his way to the bedroom. He needed to think, to process. But everywhere he looked, reminders of their life together surrounded him. Pictures from their honeymoon smiled back at him. The dresser they had refinished as a couple sat in the corner, her pillow still indented from her head. The house that once brought him comfort now felt like it was closing in on him, suffocating him with memories that no longer felt secure. Aaron grabbed his keys and headed out. He drove aimlessly through the darkened streets, his mind reeling with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. By the time he returned home, hours later, he was no closer to clarity, but a cold resolve had settled in his chest. He wouldn't confront her. Not yet. He needed proof. The next morning, Aaron woke early, his sleep plagued by nightmares and unrest. He moved through his routine with mechanical precision, showering and dressing for work as usual. When Lena stirred in bed, he kissed her cheek and muttered something about an early meeting. Instead of heading to the office, Aaron parked a block away from the house and waited. His heart pounded as he watched Lena leave for her yoga class. Once she was gone, Aaron let himself back into the house. The quiet of the home mocked him. Everything seemed too normal, too ordinary for what was happening in his life. He began searching from room to room, not entirely sure what he was looking for. A love letter? Texts? Some kind of sign to confirm his worst fears? Part of him hoped he would find nothing, that his suspicions were unfounded. But a colder, more calculated part of him was already planning his next move. He found himself in the kitchen, absently straightening some papers on the counter, when the front door suddenly opened. Panic surged through him. Lena wasn't supposed to be back for hours. Had she forgotten something? Aaron froze, every muscle in his body tensing as he strained to hear. From the entryway, Lena's voice floated toward him, low and agitated. "Mom, I don't know what to do. I can't keep this up much longer," she said, her voice trembling. Aaron crept closer, staying out of sight, his heart pounding in his chest. "Of course, I'll tell him it's his," Lena continued. "Nolan isn't ready for a baby. He might leave me if I push him for more. And besides, Aaron's always wanted a baby. He's so naive. It'll be easy to convince him." Aaron gripped the doorway for support, his knuckles turning white as the name Nolan burned into his mind. The fitness trainer. The man she swore was just a friend. The ground beneath Aaron seemed to shift as the weight of Lena's betrayal crashed down on him. Her voice faded as she moved further into the house. Aaron stood frozen, his emotions a swirling storm of anger, hurt, and a desire for vengeance. When he finally moved, it was with a calmness that surprised even himself. He slipped out of the house undetected, drove to work, and threw himself into his tasks with the same intense focus as before. To anyone watching, it was just another day in the life of Aaron Carter. But inside, a plan was forming. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging within Aaron. He lay in bed, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, acutely aware of Lena sleeping beside him. Her gentle breathing, once a comfort, now filled him with revulsion and pain. He waited until she left for her class before he moved. With calm precision, he began to pack. Suitcases emerged from the closet, quickly filling with clothes and personal items. As Aaron moved through the house like a ghost, gathering pieces of his life, he left behind the family photos, unable to bear the sight of them. His laptop, important documents, and a few treasured items made their way into his bags. In the kitchen, he paused. The pregnancy test still sat in the bathroom trash, a silent accusation. He retrieved it with a grimace, sealing it in a small evidence bag. He had plans for it. Next came the final blow. Aaron logged into their joint bank accounts, transferring every cent to a private account he had set up years ago for emergencies. He changed the passwords on all his personal accounts, cutting Lena off from everything in one decisive move. As he worked, a cold satisfaction replaced the hurt. Let her come home to emptiness, Aaron thought. Let her feel just a fraction of the betrayal I've endured. With his belongings packed and loaded into the car, Aaron took one last look around the house. Memories of lazy Sunday mornings, holiday gatherings, and quiet nights on the couch flooded his mind, but he hardened his heart. He wasn't the same man anymore. There was one final task to complete before he disappeared from Lena's life. Sitting at his laptop, Aaron composed a brief clinical email to Hannah Mitchell, Nolan's unsuspecting wife. The subject line read simply, "I believe this belongs to your husband." Attached was a photo of the positive pregnancy test. Aaron hit send without hesitation. With a final sweep of the house to ensure he had left no trace, Aaron locked the front door and walked away. He didn't look back as he climbed into his car and drove off, leaving behind the shattered remains of his marriage. The shelves were empty. Lena's heart dropped as she whispered, "No." Panic gripped her throat as she fumbled for her phone, dialing Aaron's number with trembling hands. Each ring seemed endless, but the call went straight to voicemail. Desperation rising, she tried again, this time sending frantic texts, but they remained undelivered. She sent emails only to have them bounce back. His account had been deactivated. Lena collapsed to the floor, the phone slipping from her grasp as her mind raced. How had he found out? What exactly did he know, and where had he gone? The reality of the situation started closing in on her. The house, once warm and familiar, now felt cold and hollow, as if the life she had built had disintegrated in a moment. Grasping for some sense of control, She did the only thing she could think of. She called Nolan. Across town, in a beautifully designed home office, Hannah Mitchell sat frozen in front of her computer. The email from Aaron Carter, a name she didn't recognize, was open on her screen. But it wasn't the name that stunned her. It was the attachment. Her hands trembled as she clicked on the photo, revealing a positive pregnancy test. It wasn't hers, and the man in the email was suggesting the father was her husband, Nolan. For years, Hannah and Nolan had struggled to conceive, facing disappointment after disappointment. And now, a stranger was telling her that Nolan had cheated and potentially fathered a child with another woman. The betrayal struck her like ice, cutting deep into the foundation of everything she thought she knew. But Hannah wasn't one to break easily. One thing was clear: she would get to the bottom of this. And if Aaron was right, Nolan was about to discover just how ruthless Hannah Mitchell could be when pushed to her limit. Meanwhile, in a small, sparsely furnished apartment, Aaron sat on the edge of a rented bed. His laptop glowed in the dim room, revealing emails, bank statements, property records, and text logs. He had spent hours piecing together the digital evidence of Lena and Nolan's betrayal. His goal wasn't just to uncover the truth anymore. Now, it was about making sure their entire web of lies fell apart in the most devastating way possible. A notification pinged on his phone, an email from Hannah Mitchell. Aaron's lips curled into a cold smile as he opened it. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, Lena and Nolan would face the full consequences of their deception. As night descended over the city, 4 lives were suspended in a fragile balance. Lena, desperately trying to reach both Aaron and Nolan. Nolan, caught between 2 women, trapped in his own lies. Hannah, preparing herself for a confrontation she couldn't avoid. And Aaron, pulling the strings from the shadows, ready for the storm he had set in motion. Aaron sat in his apartment, his fingers tapping restlessly on the arm of his chair. The clock ticked away the seconds, bringing him closer to the moment when Lena would return home to find him gone. He imagined her confusion, the growing panic as she realized how much her world had changed. His phone buzzed again, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from Hannah Mitchell. "We need to talk in person." Aaron smiled grimly as he typed out a reply, suggesting they meet at a quiet cafe on the other side of town. Another notification flashed across his screen: Lena. The sight of her name ignited a fresh surge of anger. Without hesitation, Aaron declined the call. Across town, Lena paced the living room, gripping her phone tightly. "Come on, Aaron," she muttered, frustration thick in her voice. "Pick up." But the call went to voicemail again. With a groan of anger, she tossed the phone onto the couch, her eyes scanning the room. The empty spaces where Aaron's belongings had been were glaring back at her. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? The phone buzzed again, and Lena lunged for it, hope flaring inside her. But it wasn't Aaron. "Nolan," she breathed, her voice trembling. "Thank God. I need your help. Aaron's gone. He took everything. I think he knows." There was a long pause on the other end before Nolan spoke, his voice cold and distant. "We can't keep doing this, Lena." Lena froze. "What are you talking about?" "The affair, the baby, it's all over." Another heavy pause followed. Nolan's voice shook slightly as he continued. "My wife knows, Lena. Somehow she found out about the pregnancy test." "That's impossible," Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was careful." "Clearly, not careful enough," Nolan snapped, his frustration boiling over. "Do you have any idea what this could do to me? My reputation, my business, everything is on the line." Lena collapsed onto the couch, her body weak with shock. "Nolan, please, we can figure this out. The baby is not my problem," Nolan interrupted, his voice cutting like a knife. "I'm sorry, Lena, but I can't be involved. Don't contact me again." The line went dead. Lena stared at her phone, tears welling in her eyes. Her carefully constructed life was crumbling around her, piece by piece. Meanwhile, Aaron sat across from Hannah Mitchell in a dimly lit cafe. She was attractive, composed, but Aaron could see the tension in her eyes and the subtle tremor in her hands as she held her coffee cup. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Carter," Hannah said, her voice calm but strained. "Your email was surprising, to say the least." Aaron nodded, his expression sympathetic. "I can imagine. Please call me Aaron. I only wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Hannah's eyes darkened with a mixture of pain and anger. How long have you known about your wife and my husband? Aaron let out a heavy sigh. Not long. I found out yesterday. Seeing the pregnancy test, it felt like a punch to the gut. Hannah gripped her cup tightly. Nolan and I have been trying for years. I thought... Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly regained control. It doesn't matter now. What matters is what we're going to do about it. Aaron leaned in, lowering his voice. What do you have in mind? Hannah's lips curled into a cold smile. I've been collecting evidence of Nolan's indiscretions for a while now, Hannah began, her voice low and determined. Financial records, suspicious transactions. I always hoped I wouldn't have to use them, but now you have no choice, Aaron finished for her. Hannah nodded. Exactly. And from what you've told me about your wife, it seems we both have a score to settle. As they leaned in closer, plotting their revenge, Aaron felt a surge of vindication. Lena and Nolan had no idea what was coming for them. Back at the house, Lena sat surrounded by scattered papers and open laptops, her frustration growing with each failed attempt to access their joint accounts. Everything had been drained, passwords changed, credit cards canceled. Aaron had erased her from his life with a cold, surgical precision. The doorbell rang, pulling her from her frantic thoughts. For a moment, hope flickered in her chest. Maybe it was Aaron. Maybe he had come back to talk things through. She rushed to the door and yanked it open. Aaron, The words died on her lips. Instead of her husband, Lena found herself face to face with her mother, Bethany. Bethany Miller swept into the house, her critical gaze scanning the chaos. Well, she said, her voice dripping with disapproval. You've made quite a mess of things, haven't you? Lena's shoulders slumped. Mom, please, I don't need a lecture right now. Oh, I think you do, Bethany replied sharply, settling herself on the couch. Sit down, Lena. We need to talk about how you're going to fix this disaster. Reluctantly, Lena sank into the chair across from her mother. There's nothing to fix, she said, her voice hollow. Aaron's gone. He knows about the affair, about the baby. He's left me with nothing. Bethany's eyes narrowed. Nothing? Don't be so dramatic. You're carrying his child. That has to count for something. Lena let out a bitter laugh. It's not his child, Mom. You know that. Bethany waved a hand dismissively. Details. What matters is what you can prove. Right now, you're a pregnant woman whose husband has abandoned her. Use that. Lena stared at her mother in disbelief. You want me to lie? To trap Aaron with a baby that isn't his? I want you to be practical, Bethany snapped. You've made your bed, Lena. Now it's time to figure out how to lie in it comfortably. Bethany leaned forward, her voice softening slightly. Think about it. Aaron has a good job, a stable income. He'd make a much better father than that gym rat you've been fooling around with. Lena felt a wave of nausea, one that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. I can't believe you're suggesting this. Oh, grow up, Bethany scoffed. This is the real world, Lena. You need to start thinking about your future and the future of that baby. Aaron may be angry now, but men come around, especially when there's a child involved. As her mother continued outlining her plan, Lena felt a growing sense of desperation. Was this really what her life had come to? Lying, manipulating, using an innocent child as a pawn? But as the harsh reality of her situation set in, no money, no job, a baby on the way, Lena found herself nodding along. What choice did she have? Across town, Aaron was putting the finishing touches on his own plan. After spending the afternoon comparing notes with Hannah, he now sat in his temporary apartment, his fingers flying across the keyboard. First, an email to his company's HR department explaining that he and Lena were separating due to her infidelity. He requested her immediate removal from his insurance and any other benefits. Next, he sent a series of messages to their mutual friends, hinting at Lena's betrayal and severing ties. Finally, he opened a new document and began outlining his case for divorce, infidelity, financial deception, everything. By the time he was finished, Aaron felt a grim sense of satisfaction. The net was closing in. His phone buzzed. Another missed call from Lena. His finger hovered over the block button for a moment before he set the phone aside. Let her stew. He would confront her soon enough. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a sharp contrast to the storm brewing in the lives of those caught in Aaron's web of revenge. He dressed with care, choosing a crisp suit that radiated confidence and control. Today, he would start dismantling Lena's world, piece by piece. His first stop was the law office of Patricia Hendricks, a ruthless divorce attorney recommended by Hannah. As he laid out his case, Patricia's eyebrows rose higher with each detail. "Well, Mr. Carter," she said, once he had finished, "you've certainly done your homework. With the evidence you've gathered, we should be able to push for a swift and decisive divorce in your favor." Aaron nodded, a cold smile touching his lips. "That's exactly what I want to hear. How soon can we file?" Patricia grinned, predatory. "I can have the papers drawn up by this afternoon. Shall we say 3 o'clock? "Perfect." As Aaron left the office, his phone buzzed, a text from Hannah. "It's done. I filed for divorce and alerted the authorities about Nolan's financial irregularities. The storm is about to break." Aaron allowed himself a moment of pure, vindictive pleasure. Everything was falling into place. Meanwhile, Lena's world continued to collapse. She woke up to a flurry of messages from friends, all expressing shock and disappointment. It seemed Aaron had been busy. Her phone rang. It was Mark, the owner of the yoga studio where she worked. Dread pooled in her stomach as she answered. "Lena," Mark's voice was strained, "we need to talk about your position here." Lena's heart sank. "Mark, whatever you've heard." "I'm sorry, Lena, but we can't have this kind of drama associated with our studio. We're going to have to let you go." The call ended, leaving Lena staring at her phone in disbelief. In less than 24 hours, she had lost her husband, her lover, and now her job. What else could possibly go wrong? A knock at the door answered that question. Lena opened it to find a courier holding out a thick envelope. "Lena Carter?" he asked. At her nod, he handed her the package. "You've been served." With trembling hands, Lena opened the envelope. Divorce papers. Aaron was suing her for infidelity and financial deception. He had evidence, plenty of it. As she sank to the floor, the papers scattered around her, Lena finally broke down. Sobs racked her body as the full weight of her choices crashed down. Across town, Aaron sat in his temporary office, methodically working through his projects. To his colleagues, he appeared focused and professional. No one could have guessed at the turmoil beneath the surface. His phone buzzed. A message from Lena. "Aaron, please, we need to talk. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but please don't do this. I'm pregnant. We can work this out." Aaron's jaw clenched as he typed back a single line. "The child isn't mine, we both know that." He hit send and immediately blocked her number. Enough was enough. As the day wore on, reports trickled in. Nolan Mitchell had been arrested on suspicion of financial fraud. His gym was under investigation, and clients were canceling their memberships left and right. Hannah had acted swiftly and decisively, using her connections in the real estate world to spread the word about Nolan's indiscretions. By nightfall, his reputation would be in ruins. Aaron leaned back in his chair, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over him. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. Lena and Nolan's carefully constructed lives were falling apart piece by piece, but he wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. As night fell, Aaron drove back to the house he once shared with Lena. It was time for a confrontation, time to look her in the eye and let her see what she had lost. He pulled into the driveway, steeling himself for what was to come. The lights inside cast a warm glow, but the warmth that once signified home and comfort now filled him with cold determination. Aaron stepped out of the car and walked to the front door. He still had his key, but he rang the doorbell instead, waiting for Lena to come to him. After a moment, the door opened. Lena stood there, her eyes red and puffy, her hair disheveled. She looked like she had aged years in just a day. "Aaron," she breathed, relief and fear warring in her voice. "You came back." "Not for long," he replied, his tone icy. "We need to talk." Aaron stepped into the house, his eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. Everything looked the same, but it felt entirely different. Lena stood before him, a mixture of hope and fear on her face. "Aaron, she began, but he cut her off with a raised hand. "Lena, I'm not here for apologies or explanations," he said, his voice cold, devoid of any warmth. "I'm here to make things clear." Lena's shoulders slumped and she gestured toward "I made a mistake, Aaron. A terrible mistake. But I love you. We can get past this," Lena pleaded, her voice trembling with desperation. "Love?" Aaron spat the word like it was a curse. "If you loved me, you wouldn't have slept with your fitness trainer." Lena gasped, the crudeness of his words hitting her like a slap. "That's not fair. Nolan and I, it just happened. Things like that don't just happen, Lena. You made a choice, and now you're facing the consequences. Aaron turned fully toward her, his eyes cold and unyielding. Here's how this is going to go. You're going to sign the divorce papers, move out of this house, and leave me alone. But where will I go? Lena's voice was small, filled with fear. I've lost my job. I have no money. That's not my problem, Aaron said, his tone icy. You should have thought of that before you decided to cheat. Lena stood there, visibly broken, her desperation palpable. Aaron, please, I'm pregnant. I can't do this alone. For a brief moment, something flickered in Aaron's eyes, a trace of the man who had once loved her. But it disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a steely resolve. You're not alone, Lena. You have Nolan. Oh, wait, he sneered. He dumped you the moment things got tough, didn't he? Lena's face crumpled. How did you know? Aaron's smile was cold and devoid of warmth. I know everything, Lena. Every lie, every deceit, and I'm done with it. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. You have 1 week to move out. After that, I'm changing the locks. As he stepped outside, Lena's broken sobs echoed behind him. He didn't look back. The following weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and strategic moves. Aaron threw himself into his work, channeling his pain and anger into productivity. His colleagues marveled at his focus, unaware of the storm beneath his calm exterior. One sunny afternoon, while Aaron sat in his new apartment reviewing contracts, his phone buzzed. It was Hannah Mitchell. Aaron, are you free to talk? He set aside his work. Of course, Hannah, what's going on? Her voice was tight, filled with suppressed excitement. It's done. The divorce is final. Nolan didn't get a penny. Aaron allowed himself a small smile. Congratulations, Hannah. How do you feel? Relieved, she sighed. And a little lost, to be honest. I've been so focused on taking Nolan down that I'm not sure what to do now. I understand, Aaron said softly. But you're free now. You can start fresh. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What about you, Aaron? How are things with Lena? Aaron's jaw clenched, moving forward. She's out of the house. The divorce should be finalized soon. And the baby? Hannah asked hesitantly. Not my concern, Aaron said firmly. Lena made her bed. Now she can lie in it. After hanging up, Aaron sat back, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. Nolan's reputation was in tatters. Lena was out of his life, left to face the consequences of her actions alone. He had won, so why didn't he feel victorious? Pushing the thought aside, Aaron returned to his work. He had a life to rebuild. Вот исправленная заключительная часть с соблюдением всех инструкций, включая плавную связь с предыдущей частью и авторский комментарий в конце. I made a mistake, Aaron. A terrible mistake, but I love you. We can get past this, Lena pleaded, her voice trembling with desperation. Love? Aaron spat the word like it was a curse. If you loved me, you wouldn't have slept with your fitness trainer. Lena gasped, the crudeness of his words hitting her like a slap. That's not fair. Nolan and I, it just happened. Things like that don't just happen, Lena. You made a choice, and now you're facing the consequences. Aaron turned fully toward her, his eyes cold and unyielding. Here's how this is going to go. You're going to sign the divorce papers, move out of this house, and leave me alone. But where will I go? Lena's voice was small, filled with fear. I've lost my job. I have no money. That's not my problem, Aaron said, his tone icy. You should have thought of that before you decided to cheat. Lena stood there, visibly broken, her desperation palpable. Aaron, please, I'm pregnant. I can't do this alone. For a brief moment, something flickered in Aaron's eyes, a trace of the man who had once loved her. But it disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a steely resolve. You're not alone, Lena. You have Nolan. Oh, wait, he sneered. He dumped you the moment things got tough, didn't he? Lena's face crumpled. How did you know? Aaron's smile was cold and devoid of warmth. I know everything, Lena. Every lie, every deceit. And I'm done with it. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. You have 1 week to move out. After that, I'm changing the locks. As he stepped outside, Lena's broken sobs echoed behind him. He didn't look back. The following weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and strategic moves. Aaron threw himself into his work, channeling his pain and anger into productivity. His colleagues marveled at his focus, unaware of the storm beneath his calm exterior. One sunny afternoon, while Aaron sat in his new apartment reviewing contracts, His phone buzzed. It was Hannah Mitchell. "Aaron, are you free to talk?" He set aside his work. "Of course, Hannah. What's going on?" Her voice was tight, filled with suppressed excitement. "It's done. The divorce is final. Nolan didn't get a penny." Aaron allowed himself a small smile. "Congratulations, Hannah. How do you feel?" Relieved, she sighed. "And a little lost, to be honest. I've been so focused on taking Nolan down that I'm not sure what to do now." "I understand," Aaron said softly. "But you're free now. You can start fresh." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What about you, Aaron? How are things with Lena?" Aaron's jaw clenched. "Moving forward. She's out of the house. The divorce should be finalized soon." "And the baby?" Hannah asked hesitantly. "Not my concern," Aaron said firmly. "Lena made her bed. Now she can lie in it." After hanging up, Aaron sat back, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. Nolan's reputation was in tatters. Lena was out of his life, left to face the consequences of her actions alone. He had won. So why didn't he feel victorious? Pushing the thought aside, Aaron returned to his work. He had a life to rebuild. Weeks turned into months, and Aaron buried himself in his career, climbing the corporate ladder with single-minded determination. His personal life remained barren, but he told himself it was better that way. No attachments meant no chance of betrayal. On a crisp fall morning, as Aaron left his favorite coffee shop, briefcase in one hand and latte in the other, a familiar voice stopped him in his tracks. "Aaron." He turned slowly, coming face to face with Lena. She looked different, thinner, paler, with dark circles under her eyes. Her hand rested protectively on her swollen belly. For a moment, neither spoke, the busy street fading away, leaving only the two of them in a bubble of shared history and pain. Lena broke the silence first. "How are you?" she asked, her voice shaky. Aaron's grip tightened on his coffee cup. "Fine," he replied curtly. "You?" Tears filled Lena's eyes. "I'm managing, Aaron. Whatever you're going to say, I don't want to hear it," Aaron interrupted, his tone sharp. He turned to leave, but Lena's next words stopped him cold. "The baby's a girl. I'm naming her Lily, after your grandmother." Aaron felt as though he had been punched in the gut. His grandmother Lily had been the only real family he had growing up. Lena knew how much she had meant to him. He turned back, anger flaring. "You don't get to do that," he hissed. "You don't get to use my family to try and manipulate me." Lena flinched. "That's not what I'm doing. I wanted you to know." "Know what?" Aaron's voice rose, drawing the attention of people passing by. "That you're using my grandmother's name for a child that isn't even mine? A child you conceived while betraying everything we built together?" Tears streamed down Lena's face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." For a moment, Aaron was transported back to happier times. Lazy Sunday mornings, playful banter over breakfast, the warmth of Lena's smile. But those memories were poisoned now, tainted by her betrayal. He took a deep breath, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Your apologies mean nothing to me, Lena. You made your choice. Now live with it." With that, Aaron turned and walked away, ignoring Lena's broken sobs behind him. His coffee had gone cold, but he barely noticed. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions he thought he had long buried. Back at his office, Aaron found it impossible to focus. The encounter with Lena had shaken him more than he cared to admit. He was considering calling it a day when his phone rang. It was Hannah. "Aaron, are you okay? You sound off." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I ran into Lena today." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "How did that go?" "About as well as you'd expect," Aaron said wryly. "She's very pregnant." Hannah's voice was gentle. "And how do you feel about that?" Aaron was silent for a long moment. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "Part of me wants to hate her. Hate that child. But part of you still cares," Hannah finished for him. "Yeah," Aaron whispered. "I guess I do." The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Finally, Hannah spoke again. "Aaron, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. I don't know. Are you?" Hannah laughed softly, a little sadly. "I'm getting there. It's not easy, but I'm learning to live for myself again. Not for Nolan, not for revenge, just for me." Her words struck a chord in Aaron. When was the last time he had done something purely for himself, not out of anger or retribution? "Maybe," he said slowly. "Maybe it's time I tried that too." As he hung up the phone, Aaron felt something shift inside him. The anger that had driven him for so long began to fade, replaced by a tentative hope. Not for reconciliation with Lena, that bridge had long since burned, but for a future where he wasn't defined by her betrayal. This story vividly illustrates how difficult it is to deal with anger, hurt, and betrayal. Many of us face situations where we are let down by those we love. It is important to realize that healing and forgiveness begin within us. As the famous psychologist Carl Rogers noted, "When I accept myself as I am, only then can I change." Accepting ourselves is the first step to healing and moving forward despite the wounds of the past. As Viktor Frankl, an American psychiatrist and philosopher, taught, there is a space between stimulus and reaction. In that space is our power to choose our reaction. In our reaction lies our growth and freedom. That power is what Aaron used. He chose to free himself from his resentment and betrayal by not letting the pain continue to control his future.